Passion of our Lord Jesus Christ according to St. Mark. When they reached a place called Gethsemane, he said to his disciples,
"Sit here while I pray."
And he took Peter and James and John with him. Power rested over him, and he said to them,
"My heart is ready to break with grief. Stop here and stay away."
Then he went forward a little, threw himself on the ground, and prayed that, if it were possible, this hour might pass him by.
"Abba, Father, all things are possible to thee. Take this cup away from me. Yet not what I will, but what thou wilt."
He came back and found them asleep, and he said to Peter,
"Asleep, Simon? Were you not able to stay awake for 1 hour? Stay awake, all of you, and pray that you may be spared the test. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak."
Once more he went away and prayed. On his return he found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy, and they did not know how to answer him. The third time he came and said to them,
"Still sleeping? Still taking your ease? Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed to sinful men. Up, let us go forward. My betrayer is upon us."
Suddenly, while he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared, and with him was a crowd armed with swords and cudgels, sent by the chief priests, lawyers, and elders. Now the traitor had agreed with them upon a signal.
"The one I kiss is your man. Seize him and get him safely away."
When he reached the spot, he stepped forward at once and said to Jesus,
"Rabbi."
and kissed him. Then they were seized and held him fast. One of the party drew his sword and struck at the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus spoke.
"Do you take me for a bandit that you have come out with swords and cudgels to arrest me? Day after day I was within your reach as I taught in the temple, and you did not lay hands on me. But let the scriptures be fulfilled."
Then the disciples all deserted him and ran away. Among those following was a young man with nothing on but a linen cloth. They tried to seize him, but he slipped out of the linen cloth and ran away naked. Then they led Jesus away to the high priest's house, where the chief priests, elders, and doctors of the law were all assembled. Peter followed him at a distance right into the high priest's courtyard, and there he remained, sitting among the attendants, warming himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole council tried to find some evidence against Jesus to warrant a death sentence, but failed to find any. Many gave false evidence against him, but their statements did not tally. Some stood up and gave false evidence against him to this effect.
"We heard him say, 'I will put down this temple, made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.'"
But even on this point their evidence did not agree. Then the high priest stood up in his place and questioned Jesus.
"Have you no answer to the charges that these witnesses bring against you?"
But he kept silence. He made no reply. Again the high priest questioned him.
"Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?"
"I am, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of God and coming with the clouds of heaven."
Then the high priest tore his robes and said,
Need we call further witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy. What is your opinion?
Their judgment was unanimous, that he was guilty, and he should be put to death. Some began to spit on him, blindfolded him, and struck him with their fists, crying out,
"Prophesy!"
And the high priest's men set upon him with blows. Meanwhile Peter was still below in the courtyard. One of the high priest's serving maids came by and saw him there warming himself. She looked into his face and said,
"You were there too, with this man from Nazareth, this Jesus."
"I know nothing. I do not understand what you mean."
Then he went outside into the porch, and the maid saw him there again and began to say to the bystanders,
"He is one of them."
And again he denied it. Again, a little later, the bystanders said to Peter,
"Surely you are one of them. You must be. You are a Galilean."
At this he broke out into curses, and with an oath he said,
"I do not know what you speak of."
Then the cock crew a second time, and Peter remembered how Jesus had said to him, "Before the cock crows twice, you would disown me 3 times," and he burst into tears. As soon as morning came, the chief priests, having made their plan with the elders and lawyers and full council, put Jesus in chains. Then they led him away and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
"The words are yours."
And the chief priests brought many charges against him. Pilate questioned him again.
"Have you nothing to say in your defense? You see how many charges they are bringing against you."
But to Pilate's astonishment, Jesus made no further reply. At the festival season, the governor used to release one prisoner at the people's request. As it happened, the man known as Barabbas was then in custody with the rebels who had committed murder in the rising. When the crowd appearing asked me for the usual favor, Pilate replied,
Do you wish me to release for you the King of the Jews?
for he knew it was out of malice that they had brought Jesus before him. But the chief priests incited the crowd to ask him to release Barabbas rather than Jesus. Pilate spoke to them again.
Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?
Crucify him!
Why? What harm has he done?
They shouted all the louder.
Crucify him!
So Pilate, in his desire to satisfy the mob, released Barabbas to them, and he set Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers took him inside the courtyard, the governor's headquarters, and called together the whole company. They dressed him in purple and plaiting a crown of thorns, placed it on his head. Then they began to salute him with,
Hail, King of the Jews!
They beat him about the head with a cane and spat upon him, and then knelt and paid mock homage to him. When they had finished their mockery, they stripped him of the purple and dressed him in his own clothes. Then they took him out to crucify him. A man called Simon from Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passed by on his way in from the country, and they pressed him into service to carry his cross. They brought him to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. He was offered drugged wine, but he would not take it. Then they fastened him to the cross. They divided his clothes among them, casting lots to decide what each should have. The hour of the crucifixion was 9 in the morning, and the inscription giving the charge against him read, the King of the Jews. 2 bandits were crucified with him, one at his right and the other on his left. The passers-by hurled abuse at him, wagging their hands.
Aha! You would pull the temple down, would you? And build it in 3 days? Come down from the cross and save yourself.
So too the chief priests and lawyers jested with one another.
You save others, but you cannot save yourself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross. If we see that, we shall believe.
Even those who were crucified with him taunted him. At midday, darkness fell over the whole land, which lasted till 3 in the afternoon. And at 3, Jesus cried aloud,
Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani.
which means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of the bystanders on hearing this said,
Hark, he's calling Elijah.
a man ran and soaked a sponge in sour wine and held it on the end of a cane.
Let us see if Elijah will come to take him down.
Then Jesus gave a loud cry and died. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who was standing opposite of him saw how he died, he said,
Truly, this man was a son of God. You may be seated. Very little needs to be said on Sunday. The evangelist does a fine job laying out for us this central story of our faith. Today, we have members of the congregation participate in saying it out loud, taking different parts. And all of you were invited to speak out. There were places for the congregation to speak out. And normally, that's where we see ourselves, as uncomfortable as it is, in the crowd. I know many people find it difficult to say when it comes to their turn in the Passion story, crucify him. But that is the general place where we put ourselves when we read this story. So I ask you this week, stay with the story. Stay with Mark's telling of the story. Begin again with yourself as the crowd, and then consider the other roles, the other players in this scene. Spend some time with each of them. Immerse yourself in what they had to say and who they were. time, and then bring it forward. Think about how this story is reenacted on a small scale in maybe our individual lives, and then on a larger scale in our world. There are still occupiers and oppressors, governments, legitimate or not, oppress people. Even in our country, justice is not always served. Think about how maybe in a smaller sense, or maybe not so small, our own lives have been impacted by depression, rejection. We've had workshops on bullying. We've had workshops on domestic violence, child abuse, the abuse of adults one for another. Bring the story forward and see how it plays itself out. Even today, where innocent people suffer, many times in the place of others, sometimes willingly, more often than not unwillingly. And think about how, as Christians, and why, as Christians, we lift this story up. Why this is so central to our faith, and what our response needs to be. Not simply in study and prayer, but in our lives transformed by that sacrifice that Jesus made in his passion and in his dying on the cross and his resurrection, and how we are to be bearers of that forgiveness, that love, that speaks against the powers, small and large, that oppress